Good afternoon, everyone. Very nice to see you all. I'm Karthik Raman. I'm a faculty at, as you can see on the screen, I'm a faculty at the Department of Biotechnology at the Bhupat and Jyoti Mehta School of Biological Sciences. I also coordinate the Center for Integrative Biology and Systems Medicine, and I'm also a core member at the Robert Bosch Center for Data Science and AI. Today I'm going to talk to you about networks in general, and because I think not many of you may be yet very interested in biology. So I'm going to talk a bit about networks in general and well how they can be applied to biological networks, but basic network science is what I'm going to mostly focus on. I think I'm audible even at the back, right? There should be no issues, but this is trying to get the mic sorted. So let's get started. All of you, I think, have learned graph theory, no? I think Madhavan has taught you graph theory. I've seen those slides, so you know what a graph is, what an adjacency matrix is, and all of that. But I don't know if you've seen this very interesting history of graph theory. So it's always nice to start with a story. The problem set in the beautiful city of, Prussian city of Königsberg in 1735. Today it's in Kaliningrad, around what is known as the Pregel River. Those days people had lots of time on their hands, really enjoyed life, and they had this question. Can I set out from my house after dinner, take a walk, cross every bridge in the city and come back home? Okay, this was their question. And if you can see, there are a few, you should be able to see the bridges. This is one bridge, one more bridge. So there are 7 bridges. So it's called the 7 bridges of Königsberg. It's very, very famous. And this was the question that they had. And so what happened was, I always say that no discussion of any mathematics can be complete without paying our respects to Euler. And Euler's, yeah. And Euler's solution to the problem laid the foundation of what we today call graph theory. So what did Euler do? This was actually Euler's caricature. He drew this, from taking this map of the city, Euler drew this sort of a map for himself. So here A, B, C are all some sort of islands, and he used small a, b, c. You may not be able to see that very clearly. It's a very old print. So this is small a, this is small b, and so on. He used those to indicate the bridges. Okay. So he wrote this look at the language of this letter, very interesting letter. He said, he wrote to the mayor of the city wrote to Euler saying, my citizens have this question. Can you help them find such a path if it exists? And then Euler wrote back saying, thus you see, most noble sir, how this type of solution bears little relationship to mathematics. He said it is not math at all. Today's mathematicians, including me, will cringe. And I don't understand why you expect a mathematician to produce it. But very nice. He said it's based on reason and all of that. But because of this, I do not know why even questions that are so unrelated to maths are still solved better by mathematicians. Very tongue-in-cheek there from Euler. And he notes very interestingly, and this is our the segue for graph theory into modern science. He says this question was very banal, but it seemed to be worthy of attention because he could not solve it using just geometry or just algebra or just the art of counting. So he needed to actually work hard to solve this problem. Euler needed to work hard to solve this problem, so it became a field. So what did Euler do? He really didn't do this, but today we represent it in this fashion. So this is very convenient. All of you are very familiar with this. There are 4 nodes in this graph and 7 edges. Of course, this is a little weird, no? What is weird about this graph from the graphs that you have studied in the past? Okay, that is one thing, undirected, that's okay. That's a very common thing. It's not very weird, no? There is something else weird about this graph. There are multi-edges, no? There are multiple edges between pairs of nodes. I'm sure you wouldn't have seen that in your course so far, right? So that's a little odd here, but anyway, it gives you the, and so what did Euler do? He proved that there is no Eulerian circuit in this graph. So today we call it an Eulerian circuit in Euler's honor. And of course, remember it's Euler, okay? You should always figure out how their names are pronounced. Just like, Westerners might clobber our names, we should also try to figure out how to spell their names right. So, so what are graphs? Just a quick intro because you already know the very important theme in computer science and data science. So it's defined by a set of vertices V and a set of edges E, which is E is essentially in V cross V. Right? It could be ordered also. If it is ordered, it's a directed graph and all that. You know all that. I'm not going to go into all of that. Now let's just think. How do you represent real world networks as graphs? Right? Say social networks or road networks, citation networks. I'll leave metabolic and gene regulatory networks for you, unless there are some folks who already know a bit of biology. So then you can volunteer to answer this. But how would you cast these as graphs? I'll just come to that in a moment. I think I'm just mentioning some of these here for completeness. I know you already know these. Directed versus undirected graphs. So example of a directed graph, right on your screen. Twitter is a directed graph, right? Facebook is an undirected graph, right? You know the concept of weights. Very interesting. Did you use a weighted graph today? Anybody use Google Maps? It's a weighted graph, right? It's weighted either based on traffic or distance or tolls. You know, if you do a longer trip and so on. So we keep using weighted graphs all the time. But what is the network there? What are the nodes and what are the edges? Have you stopped to think about it? In a Google map, buildings are nodes. Okay. Okay, edges are roads. Okay, that is fine. But what are the nodes? Intersections, right? So junctions are the best examples. You can also put locations as nodes, but it just complicates the number of nodes, right? You'll have 10 nodes next to each other, all connected on the single line or something like that. But that is also a reasonable representation. So, in fact, you will realize very quickly as you start modeling systems as graphs, there is no one correct representation for any system. It really depends upon the question you finally want to answer. You know, if you wanted to find the distance between two locations on the same road, they don't even exist if you started putting junctions as nodes, as what I was saying. So, there is always an opportunity to model the graph the way you want to answer the questions that you want. Very interesting though, one departure I should tell you here. Normally in any graph that you see in computer science, you've studied graph algorithms also, right? A few algorithms, at least I presume. Do you know Dijkstra's algorithm? So there the cost of, the weight of an edge is a cost. So a weight is always negative. I mean, meaning negative connotation. Negative weight is a different story. We'll come to that. But meaning higher the weight, it is bad, right? Higher the weight means higher cost, longer distance, something like that. Whereas in biology, it's usually the other way around. Higher the weight is usually more confidence in an interaction or things like that. So not always in biology does the weight denote a cost. It often denotes a confidence or a strength. So higher might be good. So that has its own ramifications. There are other graphs, sparse versus dense, label versus unlabeled. I think I'll not belabor these at the moment. Have you studied bipartite graphs or hypergraphs? Okay, we'll come to that in a moment, where there are very logical places where Okay, let's start talking about bipartite graphs. Okay, and hypergraphs are sort of equivalent. Have any of you heard of the Kevin Bacon game? Does anybody know Kevin Bacon? I think he was an actor, not a popular one, but they made a very popular game out of him. Right? If I tell some famous name like Robert Downey or something, you'll all know. But this Kevin Bacon game was very popular in the 90s. So the idea was this. The game involved, they would give up the name of an actor. Let's say Robert Downey, okay? And you have to connect that actor to Kevin Bacon via movies. So we say that Downey and X acted in a movie together, X and Y acted in a movie together, Y and Kevin Bacon acted in a movie together. So you are 3 hops from Kevin Bacon, and that was like a silly game. But it was a big hit apparently in the 90s and so on. What is the network we are talking about here? It's a movie actor network. What are the nodes and what are the edges? Yes? Okay, so nodes are actors and edges are movies. Okay, so can you just pick some movie and pick some actors and give me some names? I'll write. I'm going to put a round and Madhavan, is it? And I'm going to put an edge. I'm not going to necessarily have to label it, but let me label it in any case. Can you mention some other movie with Amir Khan in it? Tare Zameen Par. And I don't remember the name of any other actor from that movie, and I don't even know what the child was called. Darshan. Okay. Right. Okay. And I'm just going to call this, I'm going to put an edge. And now, can you name one more actor from Three Idiots? Salman, did I hear it right? Joshi, I'm going to write. I somehow didn't end up watching this movie. Okay. Now we have a problem here, right? And especially we'll have a problem. So now did Madhavan and Amir Khan act in, Amir and, oops. This is correct, right? But then what does this mean? Did Amir Khan and Madhavan and Joshi act in the same movie, or they acted in 3 different movies? Is there a problem? You have a problem with this representation. So your graph framework has broken down in its description of this co-actor network. I'll show you another way to do it. You have Amir Khan, Madhavan, Joshi, excuse me, that's supposed to be Tare Zameen Par. And now I'm going to draw it like this. Pakka, no confusion, very clear. This is a bipartite graph. Of course, bipartite graph can be defined even more simply, but this is a very nice way to motivate a bipartite graph. Okay, so here you have 2 types of nodes. Technical definition is the graph can be colored using 2 colors. You've already studied coloring, right? So this graph can be colored using 2 colors. So it's called a bipartite graph. Easier way for me to think about it is there are 2 shapes of nodes in the graph. Circles connect only to squares. Squares connect only to circles. No circles connect to each other. No squares connect to each other. You can project this to get an actor-actor graph. You can project it to get a movie-movie graph, meaning which movies have similar actors there, and you can do all kinds of things, right? You all know about the Netflix prize. Recommendation, right? It's a classic recommendation challenge. So basically, Netflix will give you a list of users and their preferences. Can you predict what movie they would like to watch next? Very famous prize. So all of these, you can see how you can cast it into a network. And this is also, if you draw this, it automatically goes into the erase mode. This circle I just drew is a hyper edge. It's actually an edge. You're not used to that, no? For you, an edge belongs to, but here in a hypergraph, edge belongs to What is this 2 to the V? Remember power set from school? Any possible subset of V, right? In any combination of vertices, it could be one or more, right? And of course, it should not be empty and all, but roughly this is the thing. So you can draw an edge through this. So this is a hypergraph, so hyper edge, where you can capture multi-way relationships. Normal graph captures dash relationships, binary relationships, right? So anyway, something new that you learn from today. And in biological networks, hypergraphs are very useful. Yeah, I'll have metabolites and enzymes and things like that as 2 different types of nodes. Very logical way to represent these graphs and so on. Okay. So why graphs? I may not need to convince you, but maybe you have a question. Do I know someone who knows someone who knows somebody, right? Like a celebrity or something. How long is the chain to that person? Right? How difficult it is for me to get a meeting with that person, right? Or get an autograph from that person or whatever. And is everyone in the world connected to everyone else? You may have such questions. Or who has the most number of friends? Who is most influential? And there are these kinds of questions. What are the least number of people I need to advertise to so that my product becomes viral? That's almost like a what problem? Digital marketing, but graph theory. You might have heard of it. Vertex cover? Vertex cover problem, right? I just need to find the fewest number of people so that the whole network is captured. Like my video goes, my advertisement goes viral. And our X and Y friends, this is a link prediction problem. Is this person your friend, right? The pop-up you will get on Facebook or something like that. And in fact, you will be surprised that, watch this slide carefully. I only changed the questions. The methodologies remain the same. So from here to here, is there a way to produce a metabolite X from metabolite A, which is an existence of a path question? How long is that chain of reactions? Basically the shortest path problem. Are all proteins connected to each other by a path? Trying to identify connected components. What is the most influential protein in a network? And in fact, I want to find these influential proteins in a pathogen like say the COVID virus and start designing drugs that will take down this influential protein. When you take this down, it is going to disrupt too much in the cell. It's probably going to kill the virus or things like that. And do proteins X and Y interact? So, same algorithm. Guilt by association. X has friends or X has likings that are very similar. Y has likings that are very similar. So, X and Y are likely to be friends. X connects to a very similar set of proteins. Y connects to a very similar set of proteins. X and Y should be connected to each other. So, there are many problems that naturally map onto graphs, which is why graph theory is like really, really useful. And I'm glad you've already studied it in your curriculum. And you might have heard of many of these problems: shortest path problem, traveling salesperson problem, finding connected components, graph isomorphism, vertex cover, minimum spanning tree, Hamiltonian, Eulerian path, all of these. Centrality measures you may not have heard of, and I'm going to spend some time on that a little later today. So what is the role of graph theory in biology? Why do biologists worry about graph theory? Many applications, and many biological problems naturally map onto graphs. Like path finding in metabolic networks, predicting protein interactions. No genome sequencing is possible without graph theory, because genome sequencing is, you all must have heard that genome sequencing is the big thing. Lots of people doing genome sequencing. You can go and get your genome patri made and stuff like that. So all of these things are possible today, but this requires, the sequencing technology is very fascinating. What it does is it takes this long sequence. I don't know, do you know the length of your genome sequence? 3 GB, right? 3 gigabases, my goodness, right? So 3 into 10 to the 9 bases, but you don't read it from start to end. What you do is you have some enzymes that will shatter this into pieces. You read it, it's like, you know, taking a piece of, taking a puzzle, jigsaw puzzle, just mixing it. But actually the problem here is you take several copies of the jigsaw puzzle, mix it up, and many pieces can go with each other. In your jigsaw puzzle, only one piece can fit in only one place, so it's you can do a unique mapping. And then from this complete mess, you have to reconstruct the original genome sequence. So this becomes very, very challenging, and there are beautiful graph algorithms that underlie this and so on. And then you try to identify clusters or modules in large networks. Right? Community detection. So this is a very famous problem. And network biology has gained widespread popularity today, where people construct and analyze a large set of biological networks. They could be protein networks, metabolite networks, enzyme networks, whatever. And lots of applications in machine learning and data science as well. And I think that will be very interesting to you. Can you learn on networks using community detection, or using networks? There are like various graph mining problems that people solve. And can you learn from networks? Basically make predictions based on network information and things like that. So I will go into some of these problems today as time permits. So let us first start with the basics. How do you construct graphs with these kinds of networks? So can you tell me the answer to this one? Facebook, what are the nodes? What are the edges? Okay, people, friendships. Okay, Twitter, people, follows. Protein interaction network. Anybody has done some biology? Okay, at least a handful of people. Okay, you can guess what is the protein interaction network. So some proteins, and maybe they're binding or something like that, right? And gene regulatory network, again you can have genes, and what gene activates another, what gene deactivates another, and so on. So gene interactions. I'll skip metabolic network, it can be a little too specific to my field, although it's like a lot of fun. Citation network, can you think of it? That is co-authorship network. Citation is, papers will be the nodes. So one paper will say that I got this data from that paper, no? So that is a citation. So the citations will be edges. And here authors and edges will be, this is like movies, right? Actors and movies. And again, you can imagine that a hypergraph will be a much better representation of this rather than regular graphs. Food web. Species of animals, and what are the edges? Who eats whom, right? Which animal eats which animal? Very interesting now. Protein structure. Protein structure itself is a network, if you can imagine it that way. You might have seen some pictures, no? All of you must have seen that COVID protein picture today. So it could be the 3D distance between the molecules, between the atoms, so various things. And even molecular graphs. This might sound like really weird, but we use this to great effect once. So basically take every molecule as a graph, and what you will have as a node are atoms and bonds. You can have even double bonds and this three-dimensional bonds in case of optically active molecules and things like that. So, okay. So here you go. Good? No surprises, I think. This is all, you are able to grasp all of this. Excellent. Various kinds of networks. So you see these pretty pictures to the right. So, and you can see that they get very busy very quickly. Lots of interactions, lots of nodes connecting to one another, and things like that. And the cellular function itself is a result of all these lots of networks that exist. And how do you study these networks? And that is a very, very interesting thing. This is actually my last slide. But I can probably spend like 1.5 hours on this slide because it's a very, very interesting topic where like lots of interesting questions can be answered. So now that we've talked about graph theory and so on, what is it that you really want to do with a graph? You have a graph, so what? What do you want to do with it? You know you can do Dijkstra and compute shortest paths and things like that. What else would you like to do with a graph? I'll tell you a few interesting things. I'll probably write down some of the things that you say on this slide. What will you do with a graph? How would you want to analyze a graph? You have the graph corresponding to... So, let me put it this way. You can tell me a graph you would like to use and how you would like to work with it. Yeah. So what will be your graph in that case? Very good. So you want to do some gene disease. But what should be your graph in the first place then? So you can think of a gene disease network. This is very much there. Okay. In my other course on systems biology, I do teach these kinds of networks. So, and you can start asking questions, right? Which genes are involved in the same disease? Which diseases are impacted by the same genes? Or does a gene impact multiple diseases? All these questions you can ask and answer. Okay. Any other network and what you would like to do with it? Genetic diseases, okay. So that could be inferred by the same network, no? Potentially? Yeah, absolutely. Good. Yes. Ant colonies, okay. What kind of network you want to put up and how do you want to study the network? Okay, so ant social network and network organization I'm already inserting one of my questions. What are the ants that drive the show? Right? What are the important? And I would ask, in fact, this is very interesting for me. We don't work with ants, we work with microbes. So, and Pratyay and Dinesh, both of them work on these kinds of networks. Microbiome, which is basically the collection of all microbes, could be on your skin, it could be on your hair, it could be in your gut, and so on, or it could be in the soil, wherever, and same questions. What are the important species? Which organisms are controlling the other organisms? Which organisms are helping the other organisms? All these kinds of questions. Protein drug network, very good. So this is called drug repurposing. Because a drug is already there in the market, it is approved for use for something else. But today, if you find that it is very efficient, in fact, there's this drug called indomethacin, which is, I think, used for treating muscular some problems. Also works very well against COVID inflammation. Right? So these kinds of, so it's a new function. You don't have to go through elaborate trials and things like that. As long as you can show that this is actually works, and these hypotheses can start off from these kinds of networks. You build a network and predict that this drug is going to have an effect on this protein or this disease. Maybe you can do some experiments to validate that in the lab. So let me give you some other examples. So how about an infrastructure network? An R-line network. And you might ask the same question. What are the most important airports? What happens if tomorrow the Russian airport has to be shut down for a week? or Ukraine airports have to be shut down for a week. Or, I don't know, there's some other problem and Dubai airport has to be shut down for a week. Or Mumbai airport, right? Once Mumbai airport is flooded, what do we do? Bangalore airport is likely to get flooded. What do we do? Right? So these are all very interesting questions. So what is the effect of perturbation on these networks? So you can start answering all these kinds of questions using graph theory, or we typically use the term graph theory and network science pretty much interchangeably. Network science is sort of more fancier and modern term used to denote this thing. And graph theory is generally a little bit more about the algorithms and stuff, whereas network science is more about trying to identify important nodes, important edges, important groups of nodes and edges. This is classically some of the problems that we try to solve. How do I make a video viral? I need to identify important nodes. Right? What is the most important connecting flight? Right? Or what is the most important road in the city? Right? I don't know how many of you got stuck in traffic while coming here. Right? So you know that there are some roads, there will always be traffic on that. Madhya Kailash will always be, there will be a traffic jam because it's a very central node. So, on the one hand, you will say that Dubai is a very important airport or Delhi is a very important airport because too many flights in and out. So, that is solely by number of edges coming in and going out of that vertex. But I said Madhya Kailash is very, very important. This road is very, very important. Always there is a traffic jam. Why is that important? There are only two roads that come in. Some OMR road comes in, Sardar Patel Road, Gandhi Mandapam Road. That's all. Only its number of edges is only 3. Why is it important? Volume of cars, but what is that consequence of? So it connects lots of important places. Meaning, to go between many pairs of places, you have to go through this road. So, are you now getting the feel for different measures of importance? One importance is simply how many friends you have. That makes you very special. Or it could be that, you are running a very important information network where the information you pass to the other person is very important. So, even though you may know only 2 people or 3 people, you still have a very important role in the network or a traffic network, for that example. So, there are different ways of identifying network node importance in a network and so on. So, good time to take a pause and you to come in, or should I at least explain some of the concepts? Degree, okay. So, yeah, and it's anyway post lunch. So, I don't want to be lecturing for too long, you'll all doze off. So, what we will focus on is, there's a very nice Python package called NetworkX, and you can do lots of stuff very easily on it. And Dinesh and Pratyay have put together a very nice social network. They're studying Harry Potter's social network, and that's the example graph for today. And you just go to that and start showing it. All of you have your laptops or no? Okay, so then you can just watch. We'll share this with you. So you'll be anyway able to run this at home and so on.
Okay, I think you're able to hear me, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm Dinesh Kumar. So I'm working with Dr. Karthik Raman. I'm an MS student here. Okay. So today we have a Jupyter notebook here. Are you familiar with Jupyter notebooks? Okay, great. So you said you're not very familiar with NetworkX. I'm not going to introduce you NetworkX, but I can share you some Jupyter notebook that would have like some introductory codes that would like make you familiar with how it works. It's just very simple, but right now we'll jump into a few things. So like sir said, I have a Harry Potter social network. I hope everyone knows Harry Potter. Is there anyone who have not seen Harry Potter? Okay. Okay, that's fine. That's good. Okay. Okay. So there are. Okay. So what I have done here, so I'll explain what is there like one by one. First part, I have imported a few packages, right? Few packages that we are going to use for this demonstration, for this little experiment we are going to do. I have a lot of you can see I have a lot of packages. NetworkX, the one that we are going to use. CSV is for CSV file handling CSV file. Okay, there are a lot of packages. So yeah, so once we have imported the packages, I have the details, the data of the network here in a GitHub page. I can just run this line. So if you want to run, so this is like a command line code. If you want to run a command line code, you just put an exclamatory in the beginning, and then you can just run it in notebook. So it's run. So now it's loaded. You can see if you open, you have Harry Potter social network here, right? Yeah. Next, I'm reading that CSV file using a package called pandas. Let's see how it looks. So this is basically a sample of the data we have. It's basically edge list. When we want to create a network, we can use certain file formats to create a network. So one of it is an edge list. Edge list is nothing but you say which and which nodes are connected. So here the first, okay, I'll go with, so first is Regus actress black and Sirius black is connected. What is their relationship? It's negative. They are not in a positive relationship. They are in a negative relationship. They are, so and then Sirius black and Dumbledore, they are positive relationship. So that's how this type is like a weightage of the node of the.
Dumb representation. This is good enough. I'll stand close to you. You just basically use list A and B are interacting, B and C are interacting, C and D are interacting. It's a list, and you can imagine it's very inefficient, but it's beautiful for exchanging graphs. If you want to quickly make a graph and send it to your friend, easiest way. Instead of making some matrix and all of that, it's very simple, right? Because logically you may have assembled the network in this fashion. So, and this is easy. I know that Harry Potter has these interactions. So I write down all these interactions. I make all this list is a flat file, 3 columns, CSV, source, target, type of interaction. I can obviously translate this into an adjacency matrix, adjacency map, adjacency list, whatever else I want to. Very easy for interchange of information. That's why he's loading it from there.
Right. So we have loaded the edge list file. Now we'll create a graph using this file. Okay. So this is the function here. I'm using a function called from pandas edge list. Okay. So this is from network X. So this will create a graph called G. So we'll see how the graph looks. So this is the graph, right? Let me.
Where do some people have connections to themselves?
So they are like, okay. I think they have. I'm not sure. We can omit these self loops. Sometimes there will be self loops. We can omit these in a graph. That's fine. So you can see the nodes, the big nodes are those that are important. Here you can see obviously Harry Potter. You can see Voldemort. Other people, Hermione Granger, Weasley, Dumbledore, all those people. So this mapping is based on one of the parameters that Sir was talking about, which is between a centrality.
We'll get to that in a moment. So let me ask you a question. So can you tell me the 5 most connected people in this network?
Sure.
Show that to me.
So I can say that Harry Potter, Lord Voldemort, Ron Weasley, Granger and Dumbledore are most connected.
How many connections do we have? Can you show that to me?
Okay.
Do it on the fly so they also figure out.
Sure.
Next what degree? G dot.
Sure.
So Sirius Black is connected to 23 people. Voldemort is connected to 36. Dumbledore 32. Let's see Harry Potter. 48. Oh, yeah. Short list, zero list. This. Sorted. Yeah. Yeah, I think it started. Oh, it started based on alphabetical. Reverse alphabetical. Not valid. You have to pass the key. Anyway, I mean, homework. Okay.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, okay, so show between us also. So we said that there are two ways to say if a node is important. One is if the node has lots of connections, or if it sits on lots of paths. Madhya Kailash is important because it sits on so many paths. Everybody is going from this part of the city to that part of the city has to go through this road. So it is actually a measure of the number of shortest paths a node sits on. All of you have heard of page rank? How many of you have heard of page rank? What does page stand for? It actually stands for Larry Page. Right? Because it was something that it was his ranking. He finally ranks pages, but it's called page rank because it ranks pages based on some notion of importance. Right? Do you know what that is roughly? Yeah. That is just degree, no? There is one factor that you are missing out. Not really. Relevance keywords are similar. Just one more. All of you are right, but somehow you seem to be missing one important factor. All of you are right. You are slowly getting there. I want a better word for authenticity. Authenticity is nearly there. Okay, but how means what? You have to quantify it in some way. You have to either tell me authenticity or you have to tell me number of edges, number of websites that connect to this website, something. How many? Secure website. Okay, secure authenticity. I'm going to start off with it.
How many people use the website and how many people consider the website?
Getting closer. So,
It's
very beautiful. Number of hits. You're all getting closer. Very interesting. you first said number of links, right? That is just degree. That is fine. But now, instead of number of links, if you started adding a weight to the links, how good this link is. Suppose you want to buy something, right? You will go and read reviews on some popular website, not on a random website. Because there is a notion of reputation or importance for that website. This reputation is what PageRank takes it. So more reputed or more important pages linked to a page, that page becomes more important. In fact, please go back and read about eigenvector centrality. Beautiful. Right? So instead of saying that every node contributes equally towards degree, important nodes contribute more towards degree. Right? And this is basic notion of eigenvector centrality, and it is extended in PageRank in many beautiful ways. Okay? So we have a few measures of importance now. Degree is a measure of importance. Betweenness, how often is a node between other nodes, is a measure of importance. PageRank is a measure of importance. Now,
so we calculated betweenness centrality for characters based on the relationship they have. We can see that the most important characters comes up because, you know, Harry Potter is the most important. He would have interacted with everyone. And the next one is Voldemort, and then Ron Weasley, Hermione Granger, and Dumbledore. So okay, so I have sorted this. I'm just showing the top 5. So this is like one of the way of using, you know, these centralities.
show 3 lists. You sort by each, you'll see that the list order.
Okay.
That is interesting for us. Now you sorted by PageRank.
Yeah.
Sort by. Yeah. Don't erase that. Yeah.
No. Yeah.
Good. So that is the good information, right? So you can create a more clear structure that shows these kind of things.
So okay, the first list is sorted based on PageRank. So top 5 having highest PageRank. Next is sorted based on betweenness centrality. You can see Dumbledore has come up. Yeah. And the next one is based on degree centrality, like how many edges they have. So you can see Ron Weasley is above Voldemort. So yeah, so this is about these centrality measures, how to use parameters. So I have used this character social network just to like motivate you. Like if I use some bio networks, that would might be boring for. So okay, so
So in fact, I have a collaborator. We used to work on cancer genomics analysis, and she wrote a blog article on doing the same thing for Star Wars social network. She made a complete analysis of Star Wars characters, their interactions, who is the most connected character, and those kinds of things. So a lot of fun.
Yeah, so if you don't know Star Wars, maybe like I have not seen much of Star Wars, I can just get this network and then run these things, and I can just say that who are the important characters, how are they related. There are networks for Game of Thrones, Star Wars, other novels too, some Jane Austen novels. I'll maybe try to share those with you after this class.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Dinesh will look into the data set. Did you like just make a wrong copy of a row or something? Why are there self loops? You got this data from somewhere, I presume, right? Yeah, so we have to figure that out. Yeah, no, it says the same person has a connection to the same person. I don't know. Did he put a spell on himself or something? I don't know. So maybe some more questions, right? So can you answer any of these questions using centrality measures? Or let me put up a very interesting question in the context of hopefully that this nonsensical pandemic is over. But in the context of the pandemic, suppose, right, I mean, we thankfully got lots of vaccines and stuff like that. But suppose vaccine supply was limited, we should have had a very smart vaccination plan. It would have been politically very difficult, right? Because you can't say that I'll vaccinate these people before the other people or something, but we still did that for frontline workers and so on. But can you think of, suppose you have a social contact network. What is a social contact network? You both may not know each other, or maybe you know each other, that's why you're sitting together. But in a social network, contact network, you've been exposed to him for the last 3 hours, right? So that is a social contact network. So in fact, this whole class is a sort of a clique, right? So you know what's a clique? Everyone is connected to everyone in this class because you've been in social contact for the last 3 hours. But then, you know, the one who was recording these videos, he'll have a weak edge to you, right? He only comes here for a little time and things like that. In this social contact network, you may want to figure out, in fact, there used to be a very nice game which is now broken and we couldn't retrieve the codes as well. So it was before COVID and all. It used to be the vaccination game. There'll be a network where an infection is spreading. You have to click people to vaccinate them so that you curtail the spread of the epidemic. Right? It used to be called, if somebody can dig it through somewhere, vax.herokuapp.com. I don't know if I found some video of it. You might find some video of it on YouTube at least. And maybe we should try to build it. One of you people can take it up as a project and build it. Right? Not a very difficult thing. So you have a network. How do you pick whom to vaccinate? Degree, betweenness, page rank? More infectious people. Who is most infectious? No? Maybe a bus driver or somebody who comes into contact with so many people every day, right? Rather than somebody else, right? So, hospital, right? So, frontline workers. So, you can come up with a very systematic plan based on this network. Right? Of course, it means that you should have a good network. Otherwise, garbage in, garbage out. If you don't have a good network, you can't make any useful conclusions from that network either. So, R-line network, we did a very interesting study recently. So, suppose, you know, a network is under attack or it fails. How do you repair the network very quickly? So, can I have some additional flights that will ensure that the network is not congested and so on? Which pair of nodes do you connect? And then there will be a capacity restriction. You can't say, give me 10 more flights out of Delhi, not happening. So, there's no time for launch for another flight to take off. So, you will have these kinds of constraints, and with these constraints, can you find out the simplest edge additions to this network that will make it more robust? All these kinds of questions can be answered using graph theory and network science. Okay, let's have a break, no? Let's have a break for 5-6 minutes and then we'll start. Yeah, feel free to get up, move out, wander and come back. Where do you get the data? He'll share some resource. Yes, I can share the slides. This video will also be online. The next very interesting concept I want to touch upon is that of network models. Meaning there are different types of networks that you encounter in the world. And do you have a model to capture the behavior of these networks? We always like to classify things, right? And then you say, okay, these kinds of networks behave in A fashion. These kinds of networks behave in B fashion, and so on. And once you have that, it's very useful for making predictions and consolidating your understanding of these networks and so on. Very useful. And you've studied statistical testing, right? What is p-value? I'll simply define it very, I'll not go into the math of it, but p-value is a measure of surprise. Actually, the lack of surprise. Is that a fair description? Because lower the p-value, very surprising, which means that you will throw away your null hypothesis, right, and accept the alternate hypothesis because your data is surprising you. Otherwise, you say, no, I'm happy with the null hypothesis. The alternate hypothesis is not justifiable in the context of my data. Am I right? But for this, you basically have this notion of an expectation. Your null hypothesis is basically like some base expectation, right, which is sort of nullified by some other data. So suppose I have to say that this Harry Potter network that Dinesh showed, there's no structure in that network. People are just talking to each other at random. I could make an allegation of that sort, right? But then how would I validate or invalidate that claim? I need to have a base expectation or something like that. So, for example, what do I mean by a random network? Or what could I mean by a random network? Completely random, right? But can you get more specific? So now suppose I asked you to create a random network. How do you create it? What information do you need to create a random network? Shuffle the edges. So you will need to know at least what is the size of the network, number of nodes, and number of edges. So this we typically call it as I call it G, N, P or G, N, M. M is number of edges, N is number of nodes. What is P? The probability, so it's basically make sense? This is nothing but density of the network, right? So this is total possible edges, if everything is connected to everything, versus number of edges that actually exist. So now, how do I create a random network? I take some n nodes and throw m edges at random. So that would be a random network. So now I have to compare. So Dinesh, can you tell me how many nodes and edges are there in your Harry Potter network? Correct? So now I have to create a random network with 65 nodes and 333 edges and somehow compare the two. Is the connectivity, what would I compare? Because somebody could say that Harry Potter is connected to some 65 people, but no big deal. In this network, that is what I would expect. I would expect at least one person to be connected to 65 people or something. But in reality, no, right? What is your expected number of edges? If there are 65 nodes and 333 edges, what is the average degree of the network? Because every edge will contribute to 2 degrees. Okay, I think I used the term degree a little prematurely. What is degree? Number of neighbors. So Dinesh was also showing you degree centrality and so on. Degree is the number of neighbors. So what is 333 into 2 by 65? It's about 10 only, right? What is it exactly? 10 point something. So, whereas Harry Potter has a degree of 56, huh? 48. So, much higher than average degree. And of course, this is just the average degree of such a network, but if you take a random network, where, so this assumes that edges are equally distributed. In a random network, we don't say that edges are equally distributed. That would be a very regular network. We are saying that the edges are equally probable. Any two nodes have the same probability of being connected. No node is special. That would be what you define as random. Now, if I have to do a fair allocation, suppose I have to pick 10 people from this class for, for something, right? I would have to pick them at random, right? Because there should be I should not be biased based on gender or state or any of those things, right? So it has to be a random allocation. So random means there's some sort of, everything is equal in front of a random assigner. So one very interesting thing to study is what is the degree distribution. What is degree distribution? The x-axis is nothing but a histogram of degree. X-axis is degree, y-axis is probability of seeing a node with that degree or number of nodes with that degree. Number, if you normalize, you will get probability. How do you think this looks for random? Cannot look like this. This should be uniform. What is this? And this is actually weird. This says that every degree is equally likely. That's like a very weird thing. You could have something like this. What does this mean? All nodes have the same degree. 1.0. That is also weird. Something like this. But is this what you expect? In fact, what you expect is, so what is degree? Number of neighbors. So if you are bringing it from a random process like this, what is degree? P is the probability of two nodes connecting. What is this distribution? This distribution is going to be, yes. Why? Interesting, because it's actually going to be binomial. And in the limiting case, it will be Poisson. Why binomial? Because every event has the same probability. You are counting the number of successes. Each time you have a success, you have a degree. So you are counting the distribution of successes. So it will be binomial and it will tend to Poisson in for appropriate cases and so on. And sometimes it will also look normal. So the shape of this curve will look weird, but you can always fit a proper Poisson distribution as you were mentioning. So do go and test this out and be convinced that if you actually connect every pair of nodes with equal probability, you will end up creating a network with a Poisson degree distribution. Okay. So this is one thing. Given a network, what are all the things that you want to study? How do you characterize a network? Suppose I gave you, suppose we always want to complain, Chennai there is more traffic, or Bangalore there is more traffic. You could say that the Bangalore network itself is bad. On what basis would you make that claim? So things like that, right? So you have to, or you might say that, for example, you would say that in lots of European countries, the public transport is excellent. Whereas you might say that in let's not, public transport is good but crowded in most countries. Let's talk about metro, right? In Bangalore, the metro is not great. Whereas in London, the metro is much better. Why is that? Both cities are crazily populated. Both cities have, large metro traffic. What is the problem? You could say that Bangalore or in Chennai, right? The connectivity is poor. How do you characterize this connectivity? The number of trains you need to take from one place to another is very large. Or there are some places that are not even connected to each other by a metro, right? Of course, if you take the whole public transport in the picture, this will all come down very nicely, right? And you can, in Chennai or Bangalore, any place to any place, you can go by bus, for sure, right? And that way we will be very efficient and so on. So there are various parameters you can use to characterize a network. First thing is, degree distribution, or that is one thing. I already showed, it's just this sort of a plot. It looks like this, or in some cases it can look like this, it can look like this, and so on. You have various kinds of degree distributions that you can have. And then you have this notion of density. It gives you some window into a network, right? More dense a network means it's more connected or something like that. You get a better, more easy to reach that network or something like that. What do you think is the diameter of a network? What is the diameter of a circle? It is the distance between farthest points on the circle, right? And it's the shortest distance between, it is not the circumference, right? It's not the semicircumference. It is the shortest distance between the farthest points. So what is the diameter of a network? Longest, shortest path, right? Of all the shortest paths in the network, which of them is the longest? So what is the shortest path connecting the extremities of the network, right? So that is diameter. You have something known as this is the max distance, this is the so you will see that in India over the last say 15 years, the characteristic path length, the average number of flights you need to take between two cities has drastically come down because you have many new airports and things like that, right? And similarly, you can look at it elsewhere in the world as well, right? So you'll see that what is the average number of flights you need to take to go from one place to another in the world? Maybe not more than 4 or 5. That would be the diameter of the world, right? That is the max, right? What is the average number? It might be just 2 or 2.5 or something like that. Most times you should be able to take a single flight to your destination of choice or one connecting flight through a big hub. Make sense? So these are all ways to characterize a network. Then you can look at number of connected components. And various other things. And then of course we talked about degree centrality, betweenness centrality, page rank. All these are measures to assess a network, what's happening in a network. And there is another very interesting thing known as clustering coefficient. This asks the question, if 2 people are connected, what fraction of their friends are connected? Or let me put it more simply, if A knows B and A knows C, what is the probability that B knows C? Right? A and B are friends. do B and C also know each other? If they know this is a triangle, right? So clustering coefficient basically computes. So CC of a node A is the number of triangles incident on A by total number of, so K is the number of neighbors of A. Maybe it's getting a little heavy. This is fairly simple, no? You've studied much harder concepts than this. So this essentially tries to capture what is the level of clustering in a network, or maybe another term will be easy for you. How cliquish is this network? You know what a clique is? Everything is connected to everything. So there the clustering coefficient of every node is 1.0. How much of a clique is any given network is what this computes. So why am I telling you all of these parameters? Now you can characterize networks. Let us say you want to break down a network. We want to take the COVID protein interaction network and damage it, right? So what nodes do you take out? What edges do you take out? Or how do you rank different strategies? Suppose you come up with a strategy. I'm going to take out the top nodes in a network. Maybe he comes up with a strategy that I'm going to take the nodes with the top betweenness centrality. Maybe she suggests that we should use page rank to disrupt a network. How do you conclude which is the best strategy? Well, you can try it out, but even when you try it out, how do you assess the impact? What will get impacted when you start breaking down a network? When a network starts disintegrating, how do you start measuring its impact? Diameter might increase, average path length, characteristic path length might increase, number of connected components will increase, network will start getting fragmented. All these things you can use to evaluate a network. And very interesting, you can actually, one of the strongest strategies is you take betweenness centrality and recalculate after every removal. So you take a node, take a network, pick out the node with the highest betweenness centrality, remove it. But when you remove that node, and it's obviously when you remove a node, you have to delete all its corresponding edges also. You then recompute the betweenness centralities. Again remove the top. When you do this, the network drastically breaks down. And these are the kind of attacks that you have to protect against, right? So this could be a strategy that a terrorist uses on a power grid or on an airline network and so on. So where do you build more redundancy? Where do you build more security? You could answer such questions. And in biology also we have very similar questions, right? So what is the most important network node? Or how will this network break down? What are the genes that are very tightly connected to a disease? I will start using things like there are things known as community detection and so on. What are the groups of nodes that are close to each other? And basically a sort of clustering. Have you studied clustering? Basic ML? K-means and all you've studied. You can use concepts that are like that to cluster nodes in a graph and so on. So lots of things you can do. So now that I've described some of the basic graph terminologies, these are all parameters, clustering coefficient, and clustering coefficient is defined for a node, whereas density is defined for a network. And of course, you can get average clustering coefficient for a network also and so on. Now I told you how to create a random network. So people first thought that, well, random networks are characterized by this L stands for characteristic path length. very low. So the average separation between two nodes in a random network is very low. Which means that, and this is same for real networks also. So then are real networks random? That was the question that people had. And then they realized, no, real networks aren't random. In real networks, I see a lot of clustering. I'm sure when you came here, it was a surprise for you, right? You know that somebody is somebody's friend and you already know that person and so on. Small world. Yes? So real world networks show small world properties. And small worlds are nothing but clustering. You know A, you know B, you know C. B and C also happen to know each other. So, Watts and Strogatz in 1998 came up with this notion of small world networks. For this, what they did is very interesting. They said, let us first have a regular network. And here nodes are connected to I shouldn't have put so many edges. Okay. So every node is connected to two nearest nodes on either side. This is very regular. Homework, generate the adjacency matrix for this. Right? It will be an exercise. You will understand how to do this and so on. So, what is the average degree of this network? 4. Every node connects to, what is the degree distribution? A spike at 4. That's all. All nodes have the same degree, no distribution. There is one point in the distribution. Right? And what they said is, if you start rewiring this network, and what do you mean by rewiring? You take the network and you reconnect at random. Meaning you erase this edge and connect it here. And you erase this edge and you instead connect these two. Something like that. So they defined a probability beta of rewiring. They said for some probabilities, you have networks that show two small world properties. One, low characteristic path length. Because we saw that in random, we said that that's an important property of real world networks. And high, what is it that we are talking about? High clustering and low path lengths. And they called these small world networks. Okay. So in small, and there is a very nice book called, I have the picture of the book on my other slide. It's called, I think just Small World or something like that. I'll bring it up at the end of the class. It's by Duncan Watts. I think it's called Small World, I think. So both low characteristic path length and high clustering. But then what they found was, real networks, the degree distribution looks still very similar to random networks. Not like very different, it's obviously different, but it's very different from real networks. Real networks typically have a very weird degree distribution. Can you imagine how the degree distribution of real world networks looks like? like airports. How many flights out of Dubai versus how many flights out of Port Blair? Very skewed, right? So real world networks typically have a degree distribution that looks like this. This is of course K, this is N of K. What does this mean? I'll circle 2 points here. What do these 2 points mean? Interpret the graph for me, interpret the histogram, the distribution. Can you raise your hand? There are many airports with very low number of connections, 2-3 flights out of that airport. And there are few airports with huge number of connections. So these are called as hubs, periphery. And it's very interesting. And there's something else in the world that follows this pattern. Wealth distributed like that, right? There are few people who have a lot of wealth and a large number of people who have, normal or low amounts of wealth and things like that. And in fact, Barabasi and Albert, they were two scientists, very interesting. They suggested that you can create these networks using a rich get richer algorithm. Technically, it's called preferential attachment. And what do we mean by rich get richer? If a node already has more connections, it will get even more connections. Right? See, popular people, how difficult it is to, I don't know if any of you have tried to build a new YouTube channel or something like that. It can be quite a challenge, right? How do you get subscribers? Other channels, they already have subscribers, they keep getting more subscribers, right? So, there is the rich get richer. Of course, there's a very nice paper that talks about how you just need to do 1 or 2 good videos to get more subscribers to your channel and things like that. But there is basically a complete science underlying this, and these are called as power law networks because the degree distribution follows a power law. And what is the power law? P of K is proportional to some K to the minus gamma. And if you take log, you will get a line like this, straight line. And that means that there is a long tail. This tail is very interesting. It means that at these high Ks, you still have a decent number of nodes showing this kind of behavior. You have a few nodes that have very, very high degree. So these are the hubs. And so incrementally, and so these nodes, these networks show low path lengths, in fact very low path lengths. So L is log n, very, very small and very high clustering and very real life degree distributions. So you look at internet and all that, degree distribution is like this. Now an important question for you. How do you think these networks perform with respect to A, failures? What is a failure? A node just breaks down. Or attack. Attack is somebody targets what is likely an important node in the network. So how does a power law network behave? Under failure or attack? Thoughts? So if you target hubs, the network will disintegrate fast. But random failures won't affect the network because only a peripheral node is likely to be affected at random, right? Because there are more, suppose and that's why the internet works. By chance some 10 routers fail, some 10-20 people will get disconnected from the internet. But then some 4 or 5 years back, we had a problem where some major cables got cut or there was a power outage in both the east coast and the west coast of the US. And for a couple of days at least, I think I couldn't access Dropbox and all of that. And that's because, your hubs failed. Hubs are not likely to fail, but if they fail, you are in deep trouble. So, but this is a natural consequence of how these networks are wired. Okay. So with that, we've sort of covered a lot of concepts today. I think it's overdose. I'll let you soak in all of that. But to briefly recap, I introduced you to the history of networks, graph theory, Euler, and so on. And then we looked at some simple networks, and we looked at the concept of hypergraphs and bipartite networks, which are very relevant. And then a few network parameters. How do you say that a particular node is important or not important, and so on. Okay. So you could, and there are different notions of importance, right? Because there are some roads which have only two incoming some junctions which have only two roads, but they are very important. And there are other roads which have many junctions and are therefore important. So one is important by virtue of its degree, other is important by virtue of its betweenness centrality or page rank. Right? So Harry Potter was important on the basis of page rank, betweenness centrality and degree, whereas Voldemort, no, some other one was important based on page rank. And Ron Weasley or someone was important on the basis of betweenness centrality. So you have these very interesting ways to look at the same network and ask and answer different kinds of questions. And then we looked at a bunch of network parameters. First is density, degree distribution, diameter, characteristic path length, number of connected components, clustering coefficient. All these are ways to study a network. And these are all very important concepts, and you can also quantify the disruption of a network. So suppose you come up with a strategy to disrupt a network. Take betweenness centrality and start breaking down a network. You will see that diameter increases, characteristic path length increases, and so on. And then we discussed three network models. One is a random network model. One is the small world model of Watson-Strogatz. And Watt's book was called 6 Degrees. Not small world networks. So the book was titled 6 Degrees. You may have heard the famous phrase 6 degrees of separation and things like that. And then there is also this book called Linked by Barabashi, who's the author of I didn't write his name there. Barabashi and Rekha Albert. They have this and of course, random networks are proposed by Erdős and Renyi. This was sometime in, I think, 60s, very early. Okay. So we then talked about these three different kinds of networks, and these networks have lots of applications in biology. And you folks already gave me a lot of interesting applications. We talked about gene disease networks or ant social network, microbiome analysis, protein drug networks, and so on, or even social contact networks for vaccination and things like that. So there are lots of applications for network biology. I mean, if you look at my lab webpage, you will see that we've used it in so many different scenarios. We study metabolic networks, we study protein interaction networks, we study microbial interaction networks, and so on and so forth. There are so many applications for networks in biology. I didn't want to go too deep into biology today, so I just sort of brushed the surface of network science. And one thing very important I want you to take back home from today's workshop is that you can use Network X. And it's a very easy to use Python package to do whatever you want in networks. So you should try and study about Network X. It has a very good tutorial and all of that. And next thing you have is community detection. Huh? What do you have after this? 4 o'clock, what do you have? Do you have energy for more, or you want to close it? This is interesting. So I think you folks have lots of energy, I would imagine. You're all used to, you're bored of online classes. So offline, you must be more energetic and enthusiastic. right? Part of this paradox, right? so, what do we, how do you identify communities in networks? This is a very nice story. I will show you this one picture and talk about it. Even if you don't remember some of the concepts discussed, you should remember the 7 bridges of Königsberg and all these stories that we discussed. So the other story I'm going to talk to you about today is called Zachary's Karate Club dataset. So in 1977, this social network scientist called Wayne Zachary was building a karate club dataset. He was studying a karate club in the US and the social network, who is friends with whom in the club and so on. And as luck would have it, during this course of the study, the karate club had a fight, and the club split into two. And it turned out that based on the connections between the people, they could very exactly predict which two people formed the two new clubs that came out of this karate club. Okay, so you can see these two colors, right? So you can see the split of nodes between the two groups. And apparently this is a very famous. So if you go to some network conference, you will see people wearing a t-shirt saying, if your algorithm doesn't work on the karate club dataset, go home. And there is a karate club where this is a small trophy that is passed on to the first person who mentions the karate club dataset in a networks conference. Okay. So you have all these silly insider jokes. Anyway, the thing is, how do you identify this community? So how do you characterize this closeness and things like that? This becomes a very interesting question. So you can read a lot more about it. In fact, you can even use clustering. So you take nodes and you compute their properties based on the graph, not based on other things. You know, how many paths are there between the nodes, how many paths of length 3 are there between the nodes, something like that. And you can use k-means clustering to make this network break down into clusters. Have you studied hierarchical clustering? Yeah, dendrogram kind of thing. Yes? So very interesting. So I will just give you a flavor of that because it's very nice to think about it. So there is a very famous network scientist called Newman. You can go and read more about him. So Gierman and Newman have a very interesting algorithm for community detection. What they say is simple. You take this network and you compute the betweenness centrality of every edge. Okay? And you take the edge with the highest betweenness centrality, remove it. Repeat. Again recompute the betweenness centralities, again remove the edge with highest betweenness centrality. Again recompute, again remove. Recompute, remove. Recompute, remove. At the end of it, what do you have? You will have a network with n nodes and 0 edges. Now play the video backwards. So you will get, so now I will draw your dendrogram. So this is how the network looks at the end, correct? 0 edges. Now I draw an edge between these two. And then maybe these two get connected. And then these get connected. And then these two. Whole network is now connected. Right? I mean, you have to assume that these edges are connecting this group to that group and things like that. But what you can now do is, if I cut here, I will get some communities. So if I cut here, I get every node becomes an individual community of its own. So you can appropriately cluster the network or identify communities in this network. And you want to just quickly demonstrate that for Harry Potter? So these algorithms are all built into Network X. So all you have to do is just read and understand a little bit about the algorithm and use it in Network X. Of course, implementing it on your own will give you a lot of experience and learning.
Okay, I'll just quickly show how to use Network X to find communities. Um, I have refreshed this. I'll just run these things quickly. I'm just loading the network, building graph. All right. So now we have the graph. So we'll try to use given Newman algorithm to find communities in this Harry Potter network. So I've had code. So first this set tries to find communities. Will give an output called this community generator. We use that community generator to separate out different nodes. We color these nodes for visualization. You can see different set of clusters. You have the Dursleys here, the Riddle family here. You have some. Um, okay, I'm just searching for Harry Potter. Okay, you have a green family here. You have a right. I think this blue is like the bad guys, and the green is the good guys. Red is a single. So this is like you can try to optimize this using some how many communities you want. You can like fix it like server showing you where to cut those things. So this is just a sample of how to use network X to find communities. So this is for a like legit Harry Potter. So what if we try to find communities for a random network? Yeah, so I'm just generating random network. So so okay, I'm just mapping it. So I generated a random network which has same nodes, same number of nodes as that of the Harry Potter network, and slightly equivalent number of edges. So you can see. So this is from the random network. You can see that most of these characters have like almost similar edges. It's like 16, 15, 15, 15, 15, 13, 13, 14. So let's see how the communities are generated here. See, it's all right. So error is showing in the mapping. It's not going up. So I tried to label these. So here's the thing. You cannot see like communities like you saw in Harry Potter network. Um, that's the thing. So in Harry Potter network, you saw different communities of you know proper communities of characters, but when you randomize these network, it's like you're disrupting all the information, and then you won't see proper communities.
just go back to the Giemann-Neumann part, just highlight that for people so that they can just vaguely remember it. Very simple syntax to run the game.
So we are importing, so it's under communities. So I'm importing from networkx.algorithms, I'm importing something called community. From there is this function called Giemann-Neumann. So you just given the graph that you have, it will create an iterator. Iterator is nothing but at different levels how many clusters you have. You can use that iterator. So if you want like at some fourth level you want, you can just iterate it to fourth level and then you can just find the clusters there. So if you have any doubts, I'll share this this Jupyter notebook with you. It has comments here and there, help you go through it. The error is gone. Link is there, right? The link is there. I'll also send you through some common email that you have. I've added some resources that you were asking about where I took these networks and stuff.
I hope you got a quick intro to networks. I think networks are a very interesting aspect of any field and lots of applications. I didn't really go into the biology applications, but I had a few things on my slides. Maybe I can just show some predicting essential genes in protein interaction networks or disease modules in biological networks. Predicting, you might have solved this in school. You have a molecule on the left hand side, molecule on the right hand side, what reactions? So some organic chemistry reactions you would have memorized, some Diels-Alder reaction and things like that. Can we actually predict that based on your knowledge of databases? So some graph mining here. So lots of interesting applications. And yeah, so if you want to learn more, you can read this book on networks by Mark Newman. Or this is my textbook on systems biology, where the first part is on networks. Very interesting book called Bioinformatics Algorithms. This talks about all your genome assembly using graph theory and things like that. So let me know, write to me if you have any questions or you want to learn more. And yeah, these are a lot of students and collaborators that contributed to many of these projects. I would like to thank them too. Okay, we're done. But if you have any questions, I'll hang around here for a little while. Happy to answer them. What projects? Lots, including those that I just showed. So you can look at this in my webpage. Right? I think we'll have like some 20 different things that we've done with networks easily. It is very complicated. It is very complicated. That's why biological network analysis is very challenging. But then there are ways to identify this, right? So there are ways to identify which reactions are more important in a network, which reactions you can meddle with in a network and things like that. So we have also developed some algorithms and lots of algorithms to study this systematically. It's all molecular recognition, right? So it's very fascinating. So there is a protein code, essentially, and very specific, right? I mean, so specific that your vaccine elicits a response against Delta, but not against Omicron. right? So there is so much of molecular specificity that's involved. And for those of you wondering, you don't have to know much biology to do this kind of stuff. I know very little biology myself. The basic concepts are important, but I'll promise you that they makes biology really boring in school, and real life biology is much better than that. So, no taxonomy, no flowers, no parts of the flower. Molecular biology is very quantitative, and if you look at things like these, microbiome or networks and things like that, it's very, very exciting stuff. So you can boldly jump into these projects. Some of you want to do some interns or some projects, just write to me. We have lots of exciting network stuff to work on and things like that. Email ID is K. Raman. Yeah. See, basically, you compute some sort of correlations. How often is this microbe present with the other microbe across samples? Something that Pratyay does a lot, right? And you use that to identify edges between microbes. This is from experimental data, right? So there are data sets. So there are what are known as metagenomic data sets. They tell what are all the microbes present in a particular environment. Right? So in soil, you find all of these microbes. So you see this A, B, and C coexist. And then you find that they exist in the gut also. They exist in the skin also. And then you start drawing a thick, strong edge between these microbes and things like that. Yes? Sequential way to? So you just have to sacrifice on something. So you can you don't need to recalculate the betweenness. But here it's tricky. I don't know how you will use parallel here because there is different states, no? So it's a very good question. So you can maybe think of this as an optimization problem, right? So which nodes do I minimally remove to disrupt the network or something like that? And that you can solve in parallel, right? You can have many algorithms, instances of the algorithm exploring different strategies, and then they can collate their answers and things like that. So that, yeah. So that is actually used in drug discovery and all of that. So very useful. See, essentially, and there is also this graph to vec and things like that. You might have heard of node to vec and things like that. So take a graph and learn a latent representation for the graph and try to make predictions on that. Or similarly, you can also use a graph neural network for problems involving graph objects. Right? Suppose you want to predict a new drug. Right? So you can look at it in neural network space, or you look at it in the latent space and things like that. Lots of things are possible. Yeah. Should maybe stop by my lab and talk to some of our students. Biotech building, block 2. You can ask Pratyay and Dinesh to take you. I don't know where Prashant sits though, right? I don't know if he's in DSAI or 5th floor. We also have the Robert Bosch Center for Data Science and AI there. Okay, so let's formally close, but I'll hang around. So if you have some questions, just stop by and we can chat. But some people might want to just relax after a long day.